Hello, welcome everyone to our Caring Conversation. The ARC of California is thrilled to announce Caring Futures, a groundbreaking program dedicated to supporting caregivers and family members of adults with disabilities. Understanding the unique challenges faced by family caregivers as they age, Caring Futures offers critical assistance, resources, and a supportive community. Today's Caring Conversation is just one part of the Caring Futures program here at the ARC of California. You are also invited to stay 10 to 15 minutes longer at the end for a question and answer session with our invited guest. At that time, we'll invite you to raise your hand and ask questions to our guest directly. My name is Felisa Strickland. I am a parent and sole caregiver to my daughter, Lily Olson. I also serve as a director for the ARC of California on board of directors, as well as the Alpha Resource Center here in Santa Barbara. I'm excited and so thankful to be part of Caring Futures and here today for this caring conversation. Today's topic is when caregiving gets to be too much, how the golden rule applies. I'm so excited to introduce our guest. Dr. Christina Marsack-Topolewski is an associate professor of social work at Eastern Michigan University. She has worked with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, IDDs, and their families for over 20 years. She received a Bachelor's of Science in Special Education from Wayne State University and her Master in Social Work, and specializing in both social work and aging. Dr. Marsack-Topolewski received her Ph.D. in social work with a dual title in gerontology from Wayne State University. She has over 70 peer-reviewed publications in national and international journals and encyclopedias. Her research predominantly focuses on individuals with IDDs, their caregivers, compound caregiving, coping and self-care, service use and delivery, as well as future planning. Dr. Marsack-Topolewski has collaborated on multiple grant-funded projects tailoring services to individuals with IDDs and other disabilities. In 2019, she was appointed to the National Task Group on Intellectual Disability and Dementia Practices. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and thanks for all of those of you who are attending.
Yes, we're so excited to have this conversation, a very important one for all of us as caregivers. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
Yeah, I live in Michigan. We're right outside of the city of Detroit in the suburbs, and I've lived here all my life. I have three sisters, and my parents were all really close, and I have two little ones. So I have an almost 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they keep us, my husband and I, pretty busy over here. So we're lucky to be kind of surrounded by a lot of family where we are within, a couple miles on each direction. But we're busy with our little ones. So when I have been working with the ARC on kind of this conversation and this topic in terms of self-care, it was really meaningful to me because the work many of you juggle within the home and outside of the home, I imagine, is quite a bit. So I think this is a really, really important topic.
Well, I'm excited to dive into it with you. When I happened to take your self-care train the trainer for our Caring Futures program, I was really just taken with some of your ideas, and I think it's going to be very helpful for everyone here joining us today. You've worked with a lot of caregivers and done a ton of research on the topic. So tell us why you think it's important for caregivers to focus on their wellness.
Well, I mean, when you're on the airplane and they have those pamphlets that you read when you get really, really bored, and the ones about make sure to put your mask on before putting the mask on of those around you in the event of an emergency. I think it's like that with caregiving. Is it's so easy to get consumed by the day-to-day because it's so important, right? We have to make sure that our loved ones are fed and dressed, and ADLs, their activities of daily living, are cared for, and medication and transportation and getting to and from, and even just managing a calendar of appointments. I mean, that is so much. that it's really easy, I think, to even just lose sight of what we need just to even function normally in our day to day. And I think as I, think back through the work I've done with families and caregivers, or even in my own journey as a kind of a new mom, just like looking at these things, it's so easy to forget what we need, that if we're not filling up our cup, it's really hard to be kind of putting our best foot forward for those we love. And so I think it's really important just remembering to kind of maintain those everyday things, our sleep hygiene, our eating. We just remember to eat anything sometimes, drink water, all those things. So I love this population and the caregivers I've been able to work with over the years in my own work. We see this and we talk about this of how hard it really can be.
Yeah, and it is important. I mean, that was one of the takeaways that I got from your training was, it can be as simple as just taking a time to drink a glass of water. In fact, I now do that on a regular basis. Or, just sitting and reading a quick taking 15 minutes for yourself to just read maybe something from an inspirational book that you enjoy, poems, watching one of your favorite TV shows, just taking some time out for yourself each day is so important. Doesn't have to be anything big or, but something that's tangible that makes you feel like you're putting back into yourself.
Yeah, Felisa, I think you're so right. Is it doesn't have to be something big. Because a lot of times when we think about our own wellness, our own health, our own self-care, whatever that's going to be, even our coping mechanisms that we all have, whether or not we even realize it's maybe something we're doing, it doesn't have to be big. It can be those little things that end up being pretty life-changing for each of us and how we're feeling and how we're maintaining our days and things like that. I know the water for me is really hard. Somehow it's really hard to drink water over here in Michigan. We're surrounded all of these lakes. So I guess it shouldn't be. We should be always thinking of water over here. But I always kind of pre-fill a water bottle when I'm doing well before I go in to start working. Otherwise, I realize I haven't drank anything and it's been hours and hours. So these little things can mean a lot.
Well, I kind of like the analogy of filling your cup, right? So that's what that did for me, is it reminded me that every time I stop and give myself that refill, that I can rejuvenate and energize myself to do my next task or whatever it is that I'm
Absolutely.
focused on.
Yeah, and I think even that, that word energy, I think that's so true. Is even, seeing a close friend, talking to somebody for 5 minutes that we're maybe close to or that's super positive or whatever, and you're like, oh, I can do this. I feel so good. I even know, if it's been hours and hours, and I've got young kids, so I'm kind of maybe at a different phase of life than maybe some people here on the webinar today, but oh my gosh, it can be just exhausting. We've got one kid potty training and we've got another kid doing this and there's stuff everywhere and you're so exhausted and just to even have a couple minutes of a break whenever you can fit in that break. And then when I come back, I think I'm just more engaged even in my own caregiving in my own life because it can get daunting and exhausting. And I think there's these little things we can do just to make it more manageable, more bite size in terms of kind of the work we're doing.
Yeah, staying hopeful instead of hopeless, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what are some of the tangible tips you can offer caregivers to focus on their well-being? We mentioned a few, but what else do you have in your
Yeah,
thought?
absolutely. So I'm a pretty practical person by nature. And so anything, kind of across the board. So when we start to think about our health and wellness in terms of our physical health, sometimes it's not manageable to be doing a full workout. Maybe that's like not in the cards for years, right? But there are things you can get up, you can take some movement breaks, walk around. Maybe it's possible that you're even doing some form of leisure hobby or physical activity with your care recipient. And again, it might look different. It might be chair yoga. It might be just stretching, right? It might be getting on the floor and, doing some sit-ups, jumping jacks, whatever that might look like. And so these tangible physical things, if meal times are stressful, as I think it has been for many caregivers, right? It's hard to even pre-plan. It's hard to even, look in your fridge and like, oh shoot, what's in here? I guess we're gonna kind of cut up some random things and that's our dinner. Kind of going back to finding opportunities to just pre-plan. Sometimes just having that plan can make it easier, even if the day kind of goes awry and okay, maybe that didn't work for today, but tomorrow we've got a great kind of plan for our meal. Just something that makes it easier. I've talked with a lot of caregivers of sometimes those little things are really hard. And so figuring out these opportunities to make it easy so that when those times like mealtime bugs come, or, whatever it might be that's kind of stressful, or a point of transition that can be difficult in the day, is like there's a plan in place. So pre-cutting fruit, as silly as that sounds, that's like a big one people talk to me about, is if I had fruits and veggies pre-cut, or if I have a little whiteboard and I write down my meals, and maybe it doesn't happen 90% of the time, but it happens 50% of the time, and people are like, yes. The other thing I think that can be really helpful is kind of celebrating those successes, whether or not they're a success of your care recipient or your family members or your own successes, is those like small pieces that really actually are a lot. And some of the work that I do with my colleagues, Midwest, East Coast area, we talk about this, is we don't always celebrate these, and sometimes our successes look different, right? They're not always the successes that might be, developmentally congruent, developmentally aligned, but they're big successes and they're big progress. So remembering these, I have in my own life, I have kind of a positivity email folder. I like everything in folders. It makes me feel really great. And in there, sometimes I have things of maybe something somebody sent me, or something that was really great, or a picture that kind of brings inspiration or joy in my life. And I sometimes go back to that and just remind myself of that. I have, a couple little things in my car. I love driving. I find it really therapeutic. It might not be the same in California, depending on where you're living, but these little things that can remind us of like these things we're doing. I can go on and on, Felisa, but I'll take a pause just to let you talk. There's so many, but I would just really capitalize on just those simple, pragmatic things that sometimes are just the little things that end up making a big difference in the day to day.
You mentioned three of the most amazing ones for me. I mean, those are actually things I've learned in the last year. I've been at home 24/7 with my daughter. She's 23 and aged out of school, and there's no day programs for her. So we're spending a lot of time together. And that was one of the things, like she's had a lot of anxiety around getting up, going for walks, doing things like that. So we have started some simple, basic movement time. Like when I notice that we've been sitting too long, I say, come on, Lily, let's jump up. And we don't, sometimes I can't even get her out of her chair, right? But I can get her to stand up enough to where she stands up, and then we can like move our arms or do something for, sometimes it's just literally 1 minute, but
Yeah.
that 1 minute you can tell even rejuvenates her, and just her being rejuvenated and cared for rejuvenates me, right? So so
No,
it
I
keeps
think
us
that it's so
focused on that.
true.
Yeah,
It's that reciprocal relationship that we don't always, in the work I do, we don't always realize, is like if the caregiver's doing well, the care recipient's probably doing better, and vice versa. And so anything we can do for our care recipient, sometimes we're giving back to ourselves, and anything we can do for ourselves, we're going to be more refreshed, recharged, and all those things.
absolutely. And then with like the food, that's another thing. That's a topic of contention a lot of times because it's mealtime, but yet that's not when she wants to eat. And her being an adult now, there's something to be said for her. She deserves to make her own choices on those things, right? So her schedule's not always my schedule, but being prepared with the food already ready, because if you make too big of a deal out of it sometimes, then you lose interest. So those are really good suggestions. And I think that for me, I know that they've helped a lot. So I'm sure that could help a lot of other people too.
Yeah,
And then
that's great.
also just, doing the things that make you feel better about how you're doing your caregiving, right? So do the things that you know that work for you, that help you be better prepared and better planning. As part of Caring Futures, you were hired to develop the curriculum for the Self-Care Matters class series, which launches this week. In fact, tomorrow, I think is our first class, which is really exciting.
It's
Can you give
great.
us some information about that curriculum?
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes through and kind of talks about the importance of why. Sometimes we don't even realize that we need this, focus on health and wellness. And it goes into different types of self-care. I always like to just stress, kind of in that vein of what works for one person might not work for another. I am like, my brain's a wanderer. When I do yoga, I am like thinking about, oh my goodness, I like this song, right? But I have friends and colleagues who are like, yes, I'm going to do yoga. It's so rejuvenating. I'm so focused. I'm so in the zen. I'm like, let me go run like 10 miles. I will feel so good about myself, right? So I focus on that. Is like, I'm going to walk you through a whole slew, or the training walks through a whole slew of different types of self-care, recognizing that it's not a one size fits all. And really, our lives are not a one size fits all, right? What's going to work in our life? I have some intentionally some really easy to use strategies in there. A lot of them are very evidence-based. They've been used with, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are saying they're really effective. And so I have those in there, just knowing kind of the busyness of life. Your life you might find is so busy. And if somebody's like, you need to do X, Y, and Z more, you're like, absolutely not. Who are you talking to? You clearly don't, have an understanding of our life. So really kind of these really time mindful strategies in there as well. And so I think those hopefully will be really helpful, because people can kind of pick and choose, or say, oh my gosh, I'm already doing this and this is great. So that's kind of in a nutshell, some of the facets of the training, just looking at that. And then the second piece segues into some of the resources that are available. There's so much available. And it's oftentimes regionally, geographically very specific. Although, yes, we have commonalities across the state. And if you're here today, you're probably living in the state of California. So you can even tap into the amazing services and resources that the Arc of California has. So I have those there to kind of give a segue. With many of the caregivers, kind of like Felisa, you mentioned your daughter has aged out, Lily's aged out of school-based services. So life is different, right? And so being able to kind of look at and navigate the services that are really for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but also kind of navigating some of these other services that might be available in the community. Sometimes we have family caregivers who are saying, hey, we're at a place that some of our services are really kind of aligning with the need for aging specific services. And aging can look like a lot of different things. Here in Michigan, I talk a lot about how aging is not like 60 plus. That does not necessarily mean you qualify for aging services. The other thing we know is that adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, oftentimes our services are kind of lumped in with aging support services. Not that they're not tailored and specific for hopefully the caregivers and care recipients, but sometimes those are kind of the entryways that people are getting those services. So I have resources in there. And then as well as I kind of shined a light onto the amazing things people in the community are doing. So a lot of what I would say, some of the most inspirational, really kind of motivational to me things that are happening across the country, across your state, and so forth, are really started by families. So where do we go? What do we do when services don't exist? And how do we start to capitalize on our own networks and what's available out there? I'm a big proponent. I love writing. I'm the only one probably who likes to do it. It's very therapeutic for me. So we find ourselves just writing and writing and writing and writing. And my own mother won't read my work. My mom's great. Special shout out to her. She's fabulous. But she's like, Chrissy, really? Every time I publish an article, like, really, really, it's very therapeutic. And one of the things through kind of a lot of the writing I've done and a lot of the national studies I've done is that we're finding that we oftentimes focus really heavily on the organizational supports. And we don't often talk about the supports that we're receiving from each other. I could talk to Felisa and she could tell me all sorts of great things, in terms of my own motherhood journey and, maybe, vice versa, right? There could be some reciprocal nature. And so I do, part of that training, I really intentionally capitalized on, the value from kind of the collective caregiver group and what, the strength in that. I find myself continually inspired by my own work. I studied family caregivers of adults with IDD even prior to having kids. And then I'm like, this is inspirational. This is great. I became a mother and I was like, this is so important. We need to be working faster. My colleagues are like, seriously, Kristen, we can't work any faster, right? But I think there is so much value in the collective caregiver group, and what we can learn from each other, what we can offer each other, the support, the kind words. Where did I go? I went to go pick up pizza few weeks ago and I was talking to somebody just waiting because clearly, right, I was trying to order the pizza and I'm with my two screaming children in the background and couldn't even remember half my order and thought I ordered it, but it was just in my head, right? Some of you might have had those moments. And I get to the counter, I forgot like half my order. So I reordered my second order that I thought I had ordered. And I was just talking to the girl at the front, and she's a caregiver, and we talked all about all sorts of stuff. And it was just really cool to just kind of that reciprocal, like kind of that inspiration, those good tips, those ideas, being like, you're not alone. And that I would say is like one of the other overarching things is that we're not alone in this. And so for if you're a family, if you are a family caregiver, wherever you are in that journey, if you're caring for one or more than one loved ones, regardless of age and kind of what that your day to day looks like, you're not alone. There's a lot of people in this journey. And I really wanted to kind of capitalize that in that training as well. So I hope you'll come. Um, but yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell, Felisa.
Christina, you bring up so many good points. I have to say that in my journey as a mother and a caregiver to my daughter, the parent support and parent connections that I've made have just been so instrumental in everything that I do. I couldn't be more grateful for that. And that's why I'm excited that we actually have a caregiving community, Caring Futures community on Facebook. So I encourage everybody, if you haven't joined that yet, there's a link in the chat. Join that, because that is a good way to just get some extra support from the people that are doing the same thing that you're doing. One last thing before we wrap up. Do you have any tips for people that, a lot of times I hear that, when you mention the word self-care to a caregiver, sometimes it's very like, oh, okay, yeah, well, I'll fit that in. Do you have any tips? I mean, we've talked about a lot of good stuff, but any specific tips for that caregiver that just feels like they don't have time for self-care?
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine there's many of us here today who are like, seriously, right? Seriously. I have people give me suggestions all the time, and I'm like, really, really. Absolutely. So sometimes if you know how your days go, and if you know even that your days are highly unpredictable, maybe making a couple extra minutes in the morning. And so I try to even do that in my own life. When I wake up, I have no idea what will happen, right? My children are very active. My kind of funny but not funny story. My baby went blue last week. She has this thing. She holds her breath till she passes out. Well, she went blue. We had all the EMS is great over here. All these people, she's thank God
My
she's
goodness.
fine. Yeah, it was crazy, right? It's crazy. So if your days feel a little hectic, a little unpredictable, hopefully nothing, kind of rising to the part where your kid's going blue or your adult child's going blue or anything like that, make a couple minutes in the morning. Kind of think backwards so you're making kind of that time just to have like a minute. The other thing that I found has been really helpful, it's kind of that, for those of you who know Marie Kondo, is just that simplicity. Going back to that simplicity, even if you have like 1,000 things in your closet, when you wake up, there's just yet another decision you're making. It's just like if you have kind of the basics, you go with the basics, you use that. I recently heard a stat, and I wish I could remember the number offhand, of the number of decisions the average American makes each day. And it was like tens of thousands. You think about that is like the mental load we carry as caregivers. And so anything you can do to kind of just alleviate the number of decisions. And I think some of this goes back to our own wellness, right? If you feel like, oh, you're at work and you have emails just popping up and you've got this and the dog's barking or whatever, it's just anything to kind of alleviate that. So if you can kind of pre-start your day even 10 minutes early, if you are, part of a faith-based community, maybe there's a Bible app on your phone, or prayer is part of your morning, or stretching or yoga or meditation. If you can kind of have any food pre-cut or pre-thought of or whatever, even if you need to keep it simple. It doesn't mean that, you have to have gourmet meals on the table. If you do, I'm like so impressed. I'd love to come learn from you. But just even, just something healthy and nutritious and that's going to kind of be able to start your day just kind of ready. I even try to think of those little things in terms of my own self-care. It's like, I know I'm going to have a really busy day tomorrow. Oh, shoot, I should put gas in my car. Maybe you guys aren't driving because you're in California. Maybe you have like some amazing other forms of transportation over there. But, whatever it is, to just kind of like ease those moments when you know are going to be high levels of busyness and stress in your day. So, kind of going back to what you're saying, Felisa, those little things make a difference. So, I would say, like, if you could do one thing, is just think about the parts that are hardest in your day and do one practical strategy and start with one. and then build it in so it becomes a routine, and then go to the next thing. And we're talking just a couple minutes or these little shifts. When I talk with families, I'm like, they're just little shifts. It feels really hard, but once you make them, you're going to feel really good, and then you're going to go tell somebody to do it. So yeah, so I wish each of you, continued success, but I hope you'll be able to join the training.